Hi, my guest today is Jackie Lynch. As a menopause nutritionist, she specializes in female health, offering personalized support to women navigating midlife changes. Her belief that nutrition is not about restriction, but about real, practical solutions is what drives her. And helping women make smarter and sustainable choices that support their health and well-being is her goal. She has written numerous books on the subject, including her very popular The Happy Menopause, Smarter Nutrition to Help You Flourish. All the information that we talk about today will be in the show notes below this recording. And from Uplifting Menopause Conversations, we have a special gift for you too, a symptom tracker that you could download at the end of the podcast. Hi, Jackie. It is so nice having you with us today. I'm really excited to hear your story and your whole setup. So, Jackie, how did you come to do what you're doing?
Well, thanks so much for having me today. It's great to be here. Um, okay, so as you'll have heard, I'm a nutritionist and my specialist area is women's health and menopause. But I wasn't always specializing in that area. When I first qualified, which was in 2010, this is a second career for me. I had a career in the corporate life before this, and I gave all that up in 2006 and went back to school for 4 years and studied nutrition. And so here I am. And I started out as a generalist because, well, partly because I didn't have an obvious area I wanted to specialize in. I felt that it would have been artificial choosing something. I didn't feel a calling. And I also, typical female imposter syndrome, thought, well, I don't know enough. How can I be a specialist? So I thought I'd start as a generalist, which I actually quickly learned was much harder than being a specialist because a bit like a GP in general practice, they get everything thrown at them and you never know what's going to walk through the door. And it is a little bit like that. And after about 4 or 5 years of doing that, I was asked to speak at a menopause event, which had a lot of medical professionals there talking about the role of HRT and the different ins and outs. But they wanted someone there to talk about the diet and lifestyle side of things. And it was a massive eye opener because it was a panel, so I only had about 15 minutes. And at the end of that, when we were having coffee afterwards, I was surrounded by all these women saying, thank you so much. We had no idea that diet and lifestyle could play a role in our symptoms. We don't know if we want HRT. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But it's great to know there are things that we can do that can change this. So for me, it was my light bulb moment. And that was when I thought, okay, actually, this is what my specialism's got to be because, I was in my 40s at that point and also experiencing perimenopause and using everything I knew to manage that. And I thought, well, what on earth am I doing? I need to get out there and actually make it the specialism of my clinic so that women have got somewhere to go. So that's how it all started.
Wow. What did you do? You made a clinic first? How did that take place? What was your
Well,
steps?
well, when I first qualified, I had a clinic room in a private health club, and that's where I would see people. And then a couple of years after that, I moved to a multidisciplinary clinic where there were a range of different health professionals, like osteopaths and physios and so on. And we were cross referring, which was great. And I loved that, it's just around the corner. But of course, it's slightly limited because I'm in West London, and it meant that people had to be within travelling distance. But at the time, this was pre-COVID, people weren't particularly comfortable doing online consultations. I did offer them, but nobody really used Zoom or knew what it was, so it felt a bit sort of awkward and difficult for them. So mainly, as I say, I did everything in clinic. But of course, March 2020, everything changed. And suddenly my entire practice went online. And of course, what that meant was that everyone suddenly became much more comfortable operating online because, people were doing Zoom pub quizzes and all sorts of things. So suddenly it wasn't weird to be logging in and chatting to someone in that way. And of course, it meant I could reach women all over the world, which was great. Didn't matter where they were. If they wanted my help, they could come and have it. So actually, since the pandemic, my work has entirely been remote, because actually I can do all of that remotely, and it means I can fit in around people's schedules. So it works really nicely for me.
Yeah, I think that, COVID really, as much as it was hard and horrible, I think it changed our whole way of working in every way. Yeah, it's unbelievable. So I love that you're saying that you're working with women who are in their menopause years. Why is nutrition so different in your menopause years? What is it about the menopause years that makes us have to eat slightly differently?
Okay, it's a great question. I mean, the thing is, obviously, no surprise to hear that I think that at any stage of life, having the right nutrition is really important, and it is. But there are a couple of times in life which are major transitions. One of those is puberty, and the other is menopause. And of course, anyone listening who has children will straight away know that as kids are going through their teenage years, you really looked after them. You made sure that they ate well, they slept well, they exercised, they hydrated, because you knew how important all of that was. And yet somehow women aren't very good at doing that for themselves, and they're not seeing that that same logic is absolutely needs to be applied during perimenopause and menopause, because during any phase of transition when the body's changing, it needs the best support it can possibly get. So things that you used to get away with, skipping meals or removing major food groups or anything like that, you could get away with that in your earlier years. But when you get to perimenopause, the body doesn't like it. It likes to know where it stands. The metabolism likes to know what it's supposed to be doing. And it really requires, good quality macronutrients. So all of that means that your hormones are going to balance better. And if your hormones are balanced better, that's going to impact your menopause symptoms.
It's amazing. It really is because we actually really don't realize this. The Jewish lifestyle. There are so many holidays that we have. We eat so differently than we eat the rest of the week. And that affects us too. So, like, we'll have challah bread, very heavy and good bread. We are putting it into our little salads that have lots of oil and sometimes sugar. It just, all these things we change, we live, whole life revolving around really this food. This makes a really big impact on our bodies. How would we tell someone who's living such a lifestyle how they could bring into those days that are very full of food and tradition? How would they manage it and still be healthy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the first thing, first of all, is just to get the basics right on an everyday basis. Before you start worrying about particular feast days or feast times, just sort of get the basics right when things are easier. That's the first thing, because then you're laying down the habits, and then it starts to become a new normal. So for me, that's first of all before you start thinking about, brilliant, expensive superfoods that you can only get from a cave in Peru or whatever, think about eating really good quality protein, really good quality fats. And people are often nervous about fat because they think it makes them fat, but it doesn't. Fat, well, eat too much of anything and it'll make you fat. The
Yeah.
first thing the body does with fat, in particular saturated fat, is to create sex hormones. And if ever there was a time we need sex hormones in our life, it's right now. So good quality fats and the essential fatty acids, the omega-3s in things like oily fish, um, flaxseed, that kind of thing, really good for, brain health, heart health, all of these things we need to think about. And then good quality complex carbohydrate. So not loads of sugar, not lots of refined white products, but, brown bread, brown rice, brown pasta, vegetables, fruits with an edible skin, which is where the fiber hangs out. This is slow release energy for the body and will keep you going for longer. So you're less likely to fall into the trap of wanting those sweet treats. So that's the first thing. Get that right on a daily basis when you're in your normal habits. And then of course, I'm not an expert on the various different festivals, so forgive me if I trip up here, but
That's fine.
what you then need to think about is, okay, well, how do I approach this? I mean, is it one of those things where it's one big meal, in which case, okay, well, it's a big meal. If it's sort of one of those things where, perhaps it's quite social and you're eating throughout the day, therein lies a bit of a trap because grazers
We have
typically
3 main meals on
okay,
the
loving three main meals, no snacking in between. That's the first thing. Give your metabolism a chance to rest. Give those appetite hormones a chance to do your thing. Because every time you have a meal, your blood sugar will automatically rise a bit. It's supposed to do that. You don't want it spiking, which if you have loads of sugary foods, it will. And if it spikes, out comes insulin. Insulin's job is to clean out all the excess sugar in the blood, send it to the liver to be stored. But if you've been having loads of sugar, what happens is that it will store that sugar as fat. So every time your blood sugar spikes, you're encouraging your body to lay down fat stores because of the insulin. Once insulin's done its job, it doesn't carefully calculate how to sort of get you back to where the nice blood sugar stable level should be. It hoovers up the whole lot, and in a short space of time, the blood sugar's crashed. You'll be feeling tired, irritable, shaky, headachy, dizzy. That's because our stress hormones come out, because it's dangerous not to have enough sugar in the blood. It is our primary source of energy, after all. So it takes action. The stress hormones encourage the body to start having cravings. You'll know that feeling, desperate for that carbohydrate. Gets the liver to release the sugar stores that it stored earlier thanks to the insulin. And so, of course, it's a double whammy. You stuff something in, the liver releases the sugar stores, and you don't go back to the nice narrow band, the blood sugar spikes again. So you can be in this seesaw. Now, what's really interesting about this seesaw is that insulin's great and it has its job to do. It takes about, if you have one of your big meals that you've just described, it takes about 4 hours for the insulin to start to come back down to where it should be. And when it comes back down to where it should be, another hormone comes out called glucagon. And glucagon is our fat burning hormone. So, where insulin is the fat storer, and that's important, we do need that, but we only need it for a certain amount of time. Then it's glucagon's turn, which is our fat burner. So that's all great. You can see how there's this sort of interchange of the two hormones and how it's supposed to work, which is lovely if you have 3 meals and you've got, let's say, 5 hours between them. Gives glucagon time to do its thing. But if you suddenly have a little biscuit in between those meals, what happens? Insulin comes out again. And if insulin's there, glucagon can't be. So one big thing you could do on those feast days is just eat the meal and have good gaps between them, because straight away you're encouraging your metabolism to do its thing. You're encouraging those appetite hormones to behave in the way they're designed to do, rather than letting insulin take over for the entire day and all you're doing is storing, storing, storing. See what I mean?
That's really good. Is this the type of thing that you would do? Do you give people a way of eating and things like that? Is that part of the book?
Absolutely, absolutely. I explain the whole business of blood sugar balance in the book. And I also put in some example meals, not that you have to follow, but it gives you an idea of the kind of thing you could have that would keep that blood sugar nice and balanced, keep those appetite hormones doing the thing they're supposed to do, and then helping you and your metabolism work the way that it should work. Because during menopause, things can go haywire. So the first thing you've got to do is get the basics in place so that your metabolism thinks, oh, okay, I know when she's going to feed me now. I'm not going to keep storing food because obviously there's not a famine. I know that in X amount of time, there'll be another meal. Great. So let's burn that fat then. So it will crack on and do its thing. But if you're constantly thinking, oh gosh, I put on too much weight, I'm not going to eat for 3 days, and then you binge on something, it doesn't know whether there's a famine, it doesn't know whether there's a feast. And so it just goes into what I call camel mode, where you store it, because camels store it and they walk through the desert until they get to the oasis and they can eat and drink again. And that's what we end up doing. And that's why so commonly women can start to gain weight during these years. It's not the menopause as such, but in many ways, it's our approach to the menopause that's the issue.
I think it's not only it's so much about the approach, it's about how our bodies are telling us, like, you're in a bad place, you need some of your sugar now, or you're gaining weight. It's like a whole vicious cycle in a way.
It is, and the more stressed we are, the worse our menopause symptoms are going to be,
Yeah.
because stress directly interferes with the body's plan B for menopause. Because of course there was a plan B. We weren't just abandoned to the menopause. Mother Nature has a plan B for everything, and the plan B is this: as the ovaries stop producing estrogen, the adrenal glands take over, and they produce a weak form of estrogen post-menopause to keep us fit and well. But here's the catch: the adrenal glands also produce our stress hormones. And our stress hormones, our stress response is the fight or flight response. It's a life saving response. And the body's got one job, one single job, which is to keep us alive. So, of course, if we're stressed, it will always prioritize the fight or flight response, the release of those stress hormones. And let's face it, midlife and menopause, probably one of the single most stressful periods of a woman's life. Because, you might have children, in which case perhaps it's the fabulous clash of the hormones, of menopause meeting puberty, um, the sandwich generation looking after elderly parents, holding down a busy job, increased pressure at work. perhaps financial worries, health worries, relationship issues, and then just, whether the state of the world, whether it's the latest train strike or whatever else is going on. There's a lot to worry us. And stress hormones are through the roof. And what that means is that poor old estrogen won't get a look in because the adrenal glands are far too busy producing the life saving stress hormones than to think about producing a bit of estrogen so we feel better. So one single thing you can do is really think about how can you manage and regulate your stress. How can you manage your diary so you're not overloading yourself? Get yourself a bit of me time. This isn't a luxury now. This is essential at this time of life. Thinking about fresh air at lunchtime, if you like a massage or whatever it is that relaxes you, do these things for yourself. And then eating in a way that reduces stress. And the best way to do that, which I've already touched on, is balancing your blood sugar. Because as I said, every time your blood sugar crashes, out come cortisol and adrenaline, and you probably don't need more of them in your life than you've already got.
So, phytoestrogens, a lot of people have been asking me about this. I'm just bringing that in. Is there any foods or a diet, if somebody doesn't go on any of the HRT, MHT, or whatever they're calling it today, is there a way of using food to compensate for that? I understand it's not really going to change all the hormones by eating certain foods, but is there ways that we can help that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to put it into context because I think a lot of women worry about menopause now. It's great that it's out there and we're all talking about it, but it has caused a bit of fear.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Now, 20% of women do have a very rough time. Um, they experience all the symptoms, very severe, and it's miserable. There's another 20% who sail through it and wonder what all the fuss is about. And then in the middle, there's about 60% of us who get some, not all symptoms, varying degrees of severity. That 60% can really be helped by diet and lifestyle. The 20% who are really struggling, yes, absolutely. But if you're doing everything you can with your diet and it's still not really quite getting there, you might still want to have a chat with your doctor because sometimes food just really can't do everything. It's very different for each woman. So don't beat yourself up if ultimately you do need that bit of extra help because we're all very individual. The most important thing is that you feel well.
And also, I just want to add over here that just because you can't take HRT, there are still other ways of bringing down your, the
Thing.
sweats or whatever your symptoms are. They'll treat it each one as its own, and it's still a doctor who would be able
Yeah.
to help.
Yeah. There's a new medication come out very recently, actually, which can really support hot flushes that is non-hormonal. So definitely worth it. Don't write off your doctor and think, oh, it's not worth it because it's
Yeah.
always worth a conversation. Um, and then on the food side, well, I've talked a bit about blood sugar. In fact, I'm going to do another sneaky plug, which is my book, The Happy
Yeah.
Menopause Smart Nutrition to Help You Flourish. I've got a chapter in there called If You Only Do One Thing. And
Okay.
that's the overall hormonal balancing approach, which is balancing the blood sugar, as we've talked about. And the way to balance your blood sugar is that combination of protein and complex carbohydrate every meal, every snack, non negotiable. Most women aren't eating enough protein. They often have, if they're lucky, a bit of chicken in the evening. You need protein with breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
But
That's the big thing.
we say about that when people say, "Oh, you have to have a lot of protein by your meal," I really think that people don't realize what a lot means. So could we size that in our heads?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I think that that is one of the main problems with this protein business. They've said to us, "Have a lot of protein." What does that mean? And also the complex carbs, what does that mean?
Sure. Okay. Well, that's really easy. So, when we talk protein, we're talking meat, fish, eggs, dairy. We're talking plant proteins, soya, nuts, seeds, pulses like lentils, chickpeas, beans, quinoa is a source of protein. So, those are the proteins. Now, if you think about breakfast, if you're having eggs, at least two eggs, please. Two eggs. If you're having cereal, this is where, or porridge or yogurt or whatever, dairy's not the most concentrated source of protein, so the yogurt, even if it's Greek yogurt, won't cut it on its own. I suggest 2 tablespoons of pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, ground flaxseed, or a combination of all of those, or chopped nuts.
Chai is good if you put it.
Yeah,
Is it?
chia
Yeah.
seeds, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
cheers.
Any of those. Um, when it comes to your main meals, lunch and dinner, think of your plate as a quadrant, and in one quarter, you've got the protein. Protein must be a quarter of the overall meal, and we're talking about a fist size. Your fist, not anyone else's, because it's proportional to you. So it's something like chicken breast, salmon steak, couple of dollops of hummus, whatever your source of protein might be. And if you're having starch with that meal, so rice, pasta, potatoes, bread, again, it's not more than a fist size. It's the same size as the protein. It's not half the meal. That's where we often trip up. Yeah, half the meal's pasta or whatever. We don't need that much pasta. And then the remaining two quarters, one is dark green leafy vegetables, spinach, rocket, kale, watercress, cabbage, broccoli, brilliant, not strictly leafy, but definitely part of the gang. These are a one-stop shop for menopause-friendly nutrients. They are packed with iron for women who are struggling with heavy periods and flooding. They're packed with magnesium to calm your nervous system and to support your energy. Great source of calcium. There's more calcium per 100 grams, twice as much actually, in kale as in milk. Um, Great source of vitamin C, really important for the skin and bone health because it produces collagen in the body. Vitamin K, again, important for bones. B vitamins, physical and mental health. So dark green leafy vegetables is one quarter, and then the final quarter, any other color you like. Tomatoes, aubergine, what else? Mushrooms, onions, cauliflower, anything that's not green. So that's all you need to think about. Not weighing your food because, frankly, life's too short. Not counting calories. So one quarter protein, one quarter starch, two quarters of vegetables. And if you're not having starch in the evening because you think, I'm on a bit of a diet, then it's
Yeah,
three portions of vegetables, one protein, three portions of veg. That's
yeah.
that's the way to go.
It's such really interesting. First of all, I didn't realize about the milk products. So are we talking something if I have cottage cheese, is that not considered as good as,
That's a good question.
yeah,
The two most concentrated sources of dairy protein are cottage cheese and authentic strained Greek yogurt, the quite hard stuff, not the stuff
yeah,
that's
yeah.
got that lovely consistency. So with the Greek yogurt, you're looking for at least 9 grams of protein per 100 grams for a decent one. Even with those, I'd add a little bit extra. Um, and because it just needs a bit of topping up. They are still the most concentrated forms of dairy. Or if you want dairy, just you don't like Greek yogurt and you want normal yogurt, you definitely need the 2 tablespoons of seeds that I've mentioned on top. Or if you were having pasta with cheese on top, not enough. You need to add some chickpeas or whatever it might be that would boost up the protein in there because the cheese isn't going to do it. Jackie
Mm,
potato, not just cheese, add the beans. Those are the kinds of things to think about, just to make sure you're really getting that bang for your buck. You'll feel stronger and better for it, both physically and mentally, if you get enough protein.
really interesting. I because I've been trying to change my diet. I'm actually diabetic. So for me,
Right.
it's been about not only, dieting, it's been about making sure my numbers are stable.
Of
And
course.
so I've been trying to, keep a better diet. And I've thought, okay, I'm having protein. I'll have lots of cottage cheese. First of all, my if I walk, you might see white following me because it's so cottage cheese at the moment. But it's not really enough. So I'm going to, think of changing that a bit. That's really interesting. I'm really glad you brought that up. I mean, a lot of women are now doing this GLP thing, the
Mm.
healthy
Yeah.
diet, yeah. So, I mean, what's your thought about that and nutrition? Because I think a lot of people have no choice. They are on it I'm actually for health reasons. For me, it's bringing down my sugar, but it doesn't help me lose weight. So it's just very interesting, that whole conversation about that. G
Yeah, it is. So this is the fat loss jab, the diet jab, whatever people
Yeah.
like to call it. And it's quite interesting because, of course, it was originally developed as part of a treatment for diabetes, and then they discovered that a byproduct of it was weight loss because it cut people's appetite. And it can be amazing, particularly for people who struggle with issues like compulsive eating and who are being looked after by their doctor. The trouble is, and I'm frankly amazed that this is the case, is that you can just order it online. Type in a few questions or answers to questions, make up your weight, think, I need to lose a couple of kilos, and you get it because you
Mhm.
haven't filled it in correctly. And I think a lot of people are doing that. And the problem is that it's interfering with the appetite hormones I mentioned. The G is glucagon, by the way. It's glucagon-like peptide, so it's affecting. the way the body activates appetite, essentially. And so a couple of things are happening. One is that people are becoming malnourished because they are simply not wanting to eat. And we need that nutrition right now. It's not just about, oh, well, that's great, I'm losing weight, but over time that's going to have a problem and an impact on our bones, for example. So you could be storing up problems for the future with increasing your risk of osteoporosis. A lot of people are finding that they're fatigued over time because, so if you are doing it, because I know some of you will be, and you're doing it, so let's think about what you can do. You
Yeah.
need to make sure that every meal really counts. So don't be mucking about with Mars bars and chocolate and what have you, because there's nothing in there that's going to help you. If you're going to be eating, it's got to be some meat, some fish, some eggs, things that are really good sources and highly absorbable sources of protein as well. If you're on a plant-based diet, of course, well, soya, great, but the body tends to absorb animal proteins more easily. So if you're a bit of a flexitarian, then emphasizing that could really help you. So make sure that when you are eating, even if it's a smaller meal, that it's still got what I talked about. It's got the protein, it's got the complex carbs, it's got the good quality vegetables. And if everyone's thinking, well, she mentioned fat earlier and she hasn't said a word about fat on that plate. Well, foods that contain protein also contain fat. So that little quarter is going to do the trick, basically. Because I just don't want you to have to keep thinking about, oh, have I got this? Have I got that? Which is why I try and simplify it with the plate. But yes, make every meal count. And so when you are eating, it's really, really good quality food so that your appetite will cut off, but at least what you're giving yourself what you need. So it's really important to be doing that. And if you've got
Yeah.
any doubts, do go and have a chat with your doctor.
Yeah. And I think you're right about bringing up that point that people are just buying this over line. And that's where the problems, you lose the muscle fat. And you could see this a lot of times by women who are on, or men, or anybody who's on it. All of a sudden, their faces will go thinner,
We
which is,
don't want to be losing muscle because you can lose up to 40% of muscle mass by the time you go through the menopause.
yeah.
And the muscles are what puts pressure on our bones. And when there's pressure on our bones, that activates the osteoblasts, which are the bone cells, to renew and rebuild, which is what we want. We want strong bones. So there are sort of longer term impacts that these things can have beyond thinking, oh, I can get into my jeans next week. It's more complex than that.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, I'm not getting into my genes, as you say, because it doesn't always make people lose.
Doesn't work for everyone, that's for sure.
No, and it's so funny, and I'm still, I said to my doctor, "Well, I'm going through all this, feeling sick and all that stuff," and I said, "It doesn't even make me lose weight. I haven't lost a pound." And he said, "Well, not everybody is losing weight. It helps your numbers of your diabetes." Well, that's
Yeah, and
yeah,
that's the most important thing
yeah,
for you.
for me, that's all we need.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, all this. So tell me something. We're saying we're eating for our health and we're eating for our future health, and nutrition is very valuable. What other kind of advice would you tell women on that? Not only eating, the exercising and all that. I think that's really important for them.
Sure. Just before I do that, I realized you asked me earlier about phytoestrogens, and I segued off into
Say
something
that's
else.
all right.
Let me just say super quickly what phytoestrogens are. They are plant compounds that mimic the action of estrogen in the body, and they can influence our estrogen receptors. And they're found in two sources. One is soya, traditional soya-based foods like tempeh, miso, natto, or the whole soya bean like edamame. We've processed soya in the West, so it won't be quite as rich in phytoestrogens. And the other source would be lignans. The biggest source of those are flax seeds. One of the reasons I talk about ground flaxseed to really sort of get that, because not only then do you get the protein in the morning, but you get the phytoestrogens. And studies have shown that that can make a big difference to people struggling with hot flushes, for example. So that might be something to consider on top of the blood sugar balance. But more broadly to your question, I think in terms of exercise, it's time to mix it up, ladies, because we midlife women, we have tended to go to the mat. We're doing our yoga and our Pilates, and these are great things, don't get me wrong. You can build up strength with yoga. It's great for your balance. Pilates is great for your core. But one of the big issues is that our risk of coronary heart disease, once we've gone through the menopause, increases exponentially. Before menopause, due to the protective effects of estrogen on the heart, we had a much lower risk of coronary heart disease than men. Postmenopause, it's the same. So we need to think about our heart health. So you need to start thinking about cardio stuff. You know, are you actually running out of puff? You know, can you run? Can you do fast swimming? Can you cycle? Can you dance? Whatever it is where you're actually bringing your heart rate up, working that heart. It's a muscle, needs working. So you need to do that. Still stick with your yoga and Pilates if they're your thing, because they definitely add to the picture. But you also need to think more directly about strength training. So it will depend on the nature of the yoga that you do. Certain yoga poses are, using very weight bearing because you're using the body strength, like the body weight rather, things like plank and downward dog and so on. But if you tend to do more sort of yin yoga, more restorative yoga, then you might not be building up the strength, even though you are building up the flexibility and balance. So thinking about using weights at the gym, have a chat with one of the personal trainers to help you, because we really run the risk of low bone density. You can lose up to 25% of bone density by the time you've gone through the menopause if you're not thinking hard and working hard at that, again, because of the drop in estrogen. So there's lots of ways you can do that. There's lots of great online programs run by women now as well that can really encourage you. I'm thinking of people like Julia Robinson or Cara Metz, for example, who do some great work on telling you how to do weights. If you don't want to go to a gym, you can work with 2 water bottles at home. There's lots of things you can do.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. Actually I actually give classes and we use weights. And I always say,
Excellent. Yeah.
yeah, and I always say to the women, you don't, you know, they say, "Oh, well, I'll have to use such big weights. I won't." I said, "No, let's start this very small, very easy, and it's just adding a bit more resistance to what you're doing." There's also these, stretch ropes, which are really very, very good.
Oh yeah, the band. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And they're giving you the resistance. You could go up in stretch or down and stretch. It depends what you need. So I always say it's so important to do all that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
for me, it's a mix. Suddenly, you suddenly got to think, okay, have you got into your comfort zone a bit with exercise? It's
Yeah.
time now to do a broader mix because your body's going to thank you for it.
Yeah.
Down
100%.
cortisol as well. Regular exercise, even a daily walk, all these things can bring down the cortisol, again, helping the body with its plan B.
Yeah. And one thing is really interesting. I said, I just became, I keep on saying it in all my podcasts. I think it's going to sound very weird, but I just became a great grandmother. And
Oh, congratulations.
in my great grandmotherhood, I have decided that I want to do something one thing a month that's slightly different. And there's so many different things out there just to try. Like
Yeah.
I think this week I did a sound bath, which was like
Oh, fun.
I was like, what's this gonna be about? And it was so interesting and so relaxing. So there are so many different ways that we could bring down our cortisol levels, like you said. And nutritionally, there's so much going on that we could do,
Yeah.
just small steps in the beginning, and eventually they become part of our
Yeah.
everyday life. And I think that that's really what this was all about, is understanding that nutrition. I mean, that when somebody says, I'm not going to be on HRT, or it's not the end of the world. Let me ask you something else. Is a woman's health in menopause connected to something, her relationship with herself, how she feels about herself and how she felt about herself? Do you think that that is part of it?
I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, one of the things that's really fundamental to perimenopause and menopause is that we have been governed by our hormones since puberty. They have driven instinctively pretty much every decision we make in our life. We've been driven by those hormones, the need to nurture, the all of these things. And suddenly we're at a point where the hormones start to decline. And guess what? There's headspace. And in that headspace, often women find themselves in a completely different area. They might be thinking, gosh, it's time for a huge change. I want to change my life. That might be in small ways or it might be in big ways. It might be changing jobs. It might be changing relationships. You see things more clearly in a way because you aren't being driven by the same things that biologically have been driving you. So for me, I see it very much as a sort of door opening to a whole new world of opportunity. But that's not to say it can't be really confusing, because of course, all the certainty that came with those hormones that took you in one direction in your life, that certainty goes. And that can be disconcerting. And sometimes, a lot of women feel a bit rudderless and wondering, oh gosh, what happens now? So it is a time of life where we question ourselves a lot. And I think, it's really important that women have support, amongst your good friends, your close family, your partner, whoever is sort of your rock in these times, the person that you can turn to and turn to them. Don't go through this alone if you are feeling doubts and wondering. And equally, if you're thinking, this is great and I want to go for it and go and do a skydive or whatever it is you suddenly have this wild urge to do, find like-minded people, because there's going to be loads of them out there. And find a new tribe if a new tribe is what's required. Maybe your old tribe's still brilliant. I mean, we're all different, but I think it's important to see this as a time of change and to embrace that and not to fear it.
I think that's really true, and I think that's exactly. I mean, when you said you changed jobs, when I completely pivoted from what I was to what I'm now, and anyone who tells me, "Oh, don't you feel old?" Actually, no, I actually really don't feel old. I feel, like I've accomplished and I have something to still do in my late years,
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Anyways, before we go, let's just, if you could, like, share one thing with us all to take away, what would you say?
I would say this is your time and it's time for you to be kind to yourself. We are hardwired to nurture. I said that earlier. And the truth is that you tend to put everyone ahead of yourself, whether it's your children, your elderly relatives, your partner, your work, and your friends. But actually, this is your time, and they'll survive if you take an hour out to go and have a bath and have a bit of headspace. They'll survive if you need to go out and get a breath of fresh air on your own. Really start to think about putting yourself first, because your body, your mind, and spirit will really benefit from that. Whether it's starting to think about, do you know what? I need to eat better. I need to be good to myself because I'm eating better. I need to be good to myself because I'm exercising in a different way. I need to be good to myself because I'm taking a break and I'm not allowing work to subsume my life. You'll know what the right thing is for you, because you'll know the things that you're doing better than others and other things you're not doing so well. So think about it in through the prism of being kind to yourself. And that way you're going to slide through this phase much more easily.
Very, very good. So let me say before we finish, first of all, I had a fantastic time listening to you. And some of the information surprised me more than I thought it would. And I think that's really interesting. And I just want to say, where could my, listeners reach you?
So you can go to my website, which is well-well-well.co.uk. And that's details of my clinic, my podcast, my books. You can find me on social media at well-well-well-UK. So I'm very easy to find.
And another thing is your podcast is really very interesting. So if you give the details about that, because I think I really like listening to it.
Sure, it's the Happy Menopause. Again, really easy to remember, really easy to find. It's a monthly show, and every month I have an expert on and we talk about a different aspect of menopause.
Very good. Thank you very much for coming. It's been wonderful to see you and getting to know a bit about you and about nutrition. And I just want to tell everybody all the show notes will have Jackie's details, and we will be back with some great stuff.